Okay, friends, over the next 5 weeks, we're going somewhere together. It's all going to be centered around one person's story. We're going to learn this person's story, and it's all going to be pointing towards one core foundational truth. So in this first video, we're going to do a couple of things. One, I'm going to talk about where we're going as a whole over the next 5 weeks. And then two, we're going to talk about where we're going more specifically this week. So what we're going after this month is we're going after this first bottom line, this first core truth, this first thing that we're calling a cornerstone. This year we're going to look at 9 of these. A cornerstone is something that is rooted in the strong foundation of the scripture and yet also connected to the real life moments of our real lives. Connected to the truth and also connected to our daily lives. And this first bottom line, this first core truth, this first cornerstone is this: that God's grace is greater than even your greatest regrets. Get your mind wrapped around that for just a second. You want to know how big God's grace is? Think about your regrets and how wide they are. Just think about the breadth of your regrets. The things that you wish you had done differently. The ways that you dinged yourself up or that you dinged somebody else up. Think about the breadth of those. God's grace is wider than that. Think about the depth of a couple of those. A couple of those that you regret the most, that have most deeply impacted your life or most deeply impacted the lives of others. Think about that regret. God's grace is deeper than that. God's grace is greater than even our greatest regrets. So we're going to go after that this month. And what we believe is that if we can get our hearts and our minds wrapped around that core truth, then that core truth can help us be men and women and teenagers and kids who have a more solid foundation in our lives. Does it mean that everything will go well? Of course not. Does it mean that we'll never mess things up? Of course not. But it does mean that we'll have a more solid foundation. And I think that most of us would recognize that we could use a more solid foundation. So here's the format that we're going to be using. We're going to be giving you a weekly video. This is the first one. You're going to get these on Sundays, and these are going to highlight where we're going this next week with our Bible reading plan. Each day, you'll have a new reading that will take you through Peter's life. You can get those readings through the Bible reading plan at hpumc.org/cornerstones. We'll also be handing these reading plans out on Sunday mornings, and you can also get it through the app. And if you download the app, then there are actually little introductory comments for each of the day's readings also that tie together Peter's story. Going after Peter's story is going to be helpful to us because it's another way to look at Jesus's life. It's a way to see Jesus's life through the lens of someone else's story. And I don't know if you're going to experience this, but one of the things that I've experienced is that Peter's story is the story that I can most relate to of all of the people that are found in the Bible. So we're going to read his story over 25 days, 5 readings a week, Monday through Friday, and the video that you're going to get on Sunday will introduce what we're going to be talking about in those readings that week, what we'll be reading about. So I hope that you'll use this video to help you with your just personal devotion time, your first 15, and maybe it'll be something that'll be helpful to you in a small group or some kind of community that you're in also. So that's where we're going. We're calling this series Greater, looking at Peter's life and talking about how God's grace is greater than even our greatest regrets. Okay, we're good big picture here, right? Okay, let's talk about where we're going this week. So 5 readings, Monday through Friday. The first 2 readings, let's put these together, Monday and Tuesday. So the first 2 readings are John 1 and Luke 5. These are both encounters that Peter has with Jesus really early on. So as you read these, here's what you'll be thinking about. Be thinking about what it would have been like for the real life man Peter to meet the real life man Jesus. Get past any notion of this being like a fairy tale or some kind of like fantasy. Get past this being some kind of like spiritual tale and try to get your minds into the real life situation. I mean, picture it. Try to fill in the gaps in the details of the stories and imagine what it would have been like for Peter to meet Jesus in day one's reading, and then to begin following him in day 2's readings. So what you'll see in day 1 in John 1, which is one of the passages that has impacted my life more than any other passage. What you'll see there is the first time that Jesus and Peter meet. As you look at that, pay attention to the first things that Jesus says. You see the first two things that he says to somebody else. And then pay attention to the first thing that he says to Peter. First thing he says is, Peter's, Simon, son of John, you were to be called Peter, Cephas. See, Peter's name wasn't always Peter, it was Simon. But when he encounters Jesus, everything about him changes, including his name. So just be thinking about how it is that God might be using this scripture and God might be using this month of reading to begin to change some things in you. So that first day, kind of picture that. The second day, picture Jesus calling Peter deeper. Now he might be calling you deeper also. That second day's reading happens on the north shore of the Sea of Galilee, in this place where 7 different warm springs come together and pour into the Sea of Galilee, creating some warm water that's rich in minerals where fish gathered. And this is likely where Peter and his brother were fishing. Look up some images of the Sea of Galilee. Picture what it would have been like to be there that day. Then day 3, we see kind of a typical day of following after Jesus. A typical day for Peter. Now look, we don't know what most days look like because we don't have accounts of those, but this particular day was recorded. You'll see 3 different things that happen on that day. Imagine what it would have been like for Peter to begin following Jesus around. He ends up doing it for 3 years. So as you're reading through this, ask yourself the question, okay, what is Peter learning from Jesus as these 3 things happen? What is Peter learning? And begin to ask yourself the question, okay, and what am I learning? What am I beginning to learn through this? On day 4, what you get is a short reading that we'll be going through together that shows us who the 12 people that Jesus calls to follow him closely are. One of the things that you can't really see, but if you read between the lines a little bit, what you'll know is that these 12 people are pretty different. They're not 12 people who would normally be hanging out together, but yet this is the group that he calls. As you read that, just be asking yourself the question, okay, who am I going through life with? And if you want to get even deeper than that, these are 12 people who are following Jesus together, literally. Who are the handful of people that you are trying to walk in the way of Jesus with? Is it just a solo sport for you? Or are you doing this with other people? So who's in this with you? And then day 5, we see Peter get invited into even a smaller circle with just 2 other disciples, it's Peter, James, and John, and they witness Jesus do something miraculous. It's actually the second of 2 miracles they see in that reading. Witness Jesus do something miraculous. In fact, when he begins to allude to the fact that he might do this, people laugh at him. He does something utterly laughable. And as you read that again, imagine what it would have been like for Peter to get a glimpse of this, to see this. And imagine what it would look like in your life if you were to believe at an even more deep level that Jesus can do things that are utterly laughable. So that day, how is it that God might be, this is kind of a hearkening back to day 1, how is it that God might be preparing you to experience something really big over this next month or beyond that? So those 5 days, okay? 2 days, early encounters. And ask yourself the question, what would it look like for Peter to have been experiencing this? Ask yourself the question, what might God be preparing me for to experience over this next month? How is it that he might be calling you to go deeper, the way that he calls Peter to go deeper on day 2? On day 3, we're thinking about what Jesus might be teaching us. On day 4, we're asking questions about who is walking with us. And on day 5, we're going back to where we started the week and asking questions about what it is that God might be preparing us to experience. Friends, I cannot tell you how excited I am that you're on this journey. That you are a part of this journey, exploring what it means that God's grace is greater than our greatest regrets. And if we can get our hearts and our minds wrapped around that simple truth, that simple truth can be a game changer for us. So dig in deep this week. read, reflect, talk with people. And I'll see you again next week as we continue looking at Peter's story and this deep truth about just how great God's grace is.